This is Mark with LaurelHollowPark.net, and today we're going to look at pieces made by the Homer Laughlin China Company from the late 1890s to about 1915. These shapes represent the fancy embossed group, and we're going to start with Golden Gate, which was made from 1896 to 1905. And we have a Golden Gate sugar, we have a covered dish, an egg cup, a demi-tasse cup and saucer, and a butter dish. So we need to talk about what was going on in the 1890s. In the last video we talked about Rococo, which was discontinued in the 1890s. Golden Gate essentially replaced it. But the pottery industry was not in the greatest shape at the time. In 1894, many of the potteries signed an agreement that was known as the White Granite and Semi-Porcelain Association. And in that agreement, they stated that they would not undercut one another, that they would fix the prices. And one of the reasons for this was because of the tariffs that were going on. All these European imports were flooding the market, and potteries were having a hard time. Many potteries were cutting their hours, they were laying off people, they were recalling their salesmen, all the wear was building up in their inventories. And it wasn't until 1897 that things reversed when those old tariffs were done away with. Coincidentally, that's when Homer Laughlin, the man, left the Homer Laughlin China Company, and the Wells and Aarons took over. And after they took over, you see all this expansion, and it's highlighted by all these different shapes that we're going to see. They kept building more additions to the pottery. You had more floor space, you had more bottle kilns, and so all these pieces and shapes and treatments were a result of that. It starts with Golden Gate, however, in the 1890s. And what we have, again, we've got the sugar. This is the blackberry and fern treatment. We have this underglaze print with gold trim. We have gold stamps on this covered butter. So we have a different variety of treatments. And then we actually have plain whiteware. Golden Gate is marked with several different backstamps. Actually, most of these pieces are going to be marked with different markings. We have the eagle and lion with Golden Gate, the shape name up top. And then we have the circular mark. A lot of these have these circle marks with the eagle and lion and the shape name underneath. That's Golden Gate. So there's at least two different markings for Golden Gate. In 1899, we have American Beauty. It was in 1899 that plant number 2 in East End was built. And American Beauty was actually the first line made by Homer Laughlin that was made for 10 years. And we have two covered dishes. We have this one. This one actually has a treatment number in the inside, pattern 714. This one with gold stamps. This is actually a later American Beauty piece. And actually, it's treatment H42. So this was borrowed from the Hudson shape. Spoon holder, cup and saucer, and then the sugar bowl. And you can see in the sugar bowl that distinctive C handle that is found on American Beauty. We also have this sort of ribbon-like finial that you also find on the covered dishes. So that's American Beauty. It will have the circle mark as well, with American Beauty as the shape name, the eagle and lion. Next is Colonial from 1900 to 1909. We've got a covered dish. We got a creamer and demi-tasse cup and saucer. This covered butter with Christmas holly decal, and a 9-inch plate. Now this plate, because it has this flow blue design, you can actually see the embossing. This little swag detail going on all the way around the rim. This is a problem with a lot of these fancy embossed shapes, not only of Homer Laughlin but of other potteries, is that the embossing is so faint you can barely see it. But because we have this flow blue on here, it sort of brings it to life. If we were to look at this demi-tasse saucer, you can't even see any embossing on it, but it's there. But it's just so faint. The marking, we have the eagle and lion with Colonial up top. And you're going to find circle marks on Colonial as well. Here's one with the shape name on the bottom. There's actually 5 different markings that were used on Colonial. Sometimes the eagle's wings are pointed up, sometimes they're pointed down. You also see the script marking, which I don't think I have an example of that out. Let's see what this casserole has. I'm sorry, covered dish. Oh, there's the script marking. All right, so there's at least 3 different markings on Colonial that we've seen, but I think there's 5 in total. Seneca, 1901 to 1909. Now, Seneca, it's not common that you'll find one with Seneca in the back stamp. You can find it, but most often, if you find a piece of Seneca, it will have white granite with the eagle and lion. So we have this violets with gold stipple on the sugar. Well, we've got this jug that we just saw with gold stamps. This is an underglaze print of Christmas holly, but instead of a decal like you see on this Colonial butter, this one actually has filled-in details of the berries in red and, of course, the leaves in green. And then a cup and saucer with Seneca. And this should be probably marked white granite as well, yes. Next is King Charles in 1902. And it was in 1902 that the first wares were drawn from plant number 3, which was in the East End. And just like the Colonial piece, the blue brings out the embossing in this plate. And you see this chain detail. Let me bring it up. So ordinarily you wouldn't see that, but because of the blue and the gold, it's sort of highlighted. This would actually be considered a piece of artware, because you wouldn't find a full set of dinnerware with this treatment. And this has the circle mark with the eagle and lion, King Charles copyrighted mark. We have a plate, we have a sauce boat, and of course a creamer. The Angelus, 1904 to 1919. This is the first shape to actually run for more than 15 years. We have a sugar with the Chester Rose decal. And this is Trinity Rose on a covered casserole, and Royal Majolica on a jug. And you can look at the jug's handle. It's serpentine design. You can actually see it on the finials of the covered pieces as well. It's very distinct. You can't confuse this with any other Homer Laughlin shape or any other pottery for that matter. Royal Majolica is made up of these outdoor scenes. It actually has a special double stamp with the treatment name Royal Majolica. I actually did an article in the dish, HLCCA, the dish on Royal Majolica. So if you want to see more pieces, you can check that out. Hudson, 1907 to 1928. We have got a covered sugar in the back, a teapot, that's actually treatment H88, I believe. There's a gravy boat, that's treatment H36, and this creamer is H135. This treatment was also used on Virginia Rose, which is somewhat unusual that a treatment from 1907 would be used all the way in the 1930s. I think on Virginia Rose it's VR 104, but I'm not 100% sure on that. We need to talk about this, 1928, as the date it was discontinued. And even Joe Cunningham in one of her books says that the Knoll shape, which was made by Frederick Reed, replaces the Hudson shape in 1928, and that's essentially true. It's largely true, but it's not entirely true. If we look at the sugar bowl and its marking, it actually says K9N on the bottom, made in the USA. So that's a 1929 marking. And we have actually a little more explicit marking with this gravy, with this treatment H36, and it says D30N, so that's from 1930. So we have pieces that were made after 1928, but I think that this highlights the fact that if you see a date of discontinuation, you should not, it's not set in stone. We saw this with Rococo from the last video, where it was discontinued in the 1890s, but pieces of Rococo appeared in the 1907 catalog, like the platter, the coffee cup and saucer, the teacup and saucer. So these lines tend to trail off rather than just be discontinued at a specific date. And this is actually a popular pattern, so it's probably filling an order. So they probably made those in 1930. It's a long-running pattern. H36. Niagara, 1909 to 1911. This was a very short run, and mainly because Genesee took over. There's a little bit of overlap of 1 year between these two shapes, and they're almost identical. Niagara does have embossing, and I don't know if you can see it in the video. There's a very fine line running around the bottom. That's the extent of Niagara's embossing, which is also an inside line on flatware. And we've got a large jug, we've got a gravy boat, and a demi-tasse cup and saucer. And Niagara has a script marking. So I should mention that. When we look at Angelus, let's backtrack for a second here. We look at Angelus, and it's going to have a script marking. It does not have the eagle and lion. The eagle and lion disappears at this time, and what you get in its place is this French-inspired fleur-de-lis logo that's still used today. So when that happened, they went back to the shapes that were still being made and changed their markings as well. So whereas King Charles had the eagle and lion, they went and changed it to match the more modern Angelus marking and put the shape name at the bottom, and it has the logo up top. They even went back as far as American Beauty. Let's look at this piece, because I know that this is a Hudson treatment on here. And it says American Beauty at the bottom, and it has the fleur-de-lis logo up top. So Angelus is where you lose the eagle and lion. And I wanted to mention that, particularly with Niagara and Genesee, because you might look at these shapes, go, okay, these look like plain round shapes. Why are they included in the fancy embossed group? And one of the reasons has to do with the markings, because this whole script marking with the fleur-de-lis logo matches what's going on with Hudson and Angelus. Here we see another one. Genesee, when Genesee comes around, we start seeing date codes. And this one is 53L, which is May 1913. And the L, we need to talk about that L for a second, because a lot of people think that that L stands for Liverpool, as in East Liverpool. In fact, it stands for Laughlin Potteries, because that's how they differentiated the potteries in Ohio from the ones in West Virginia. L stood for Laughlin Potteries, which were plants 1, 2, and 3, and stood for the Knoll Potteries, which were 4, 5, at this time 6. No, 6 was in the 1920s. Plant number 5 would have been done in 1914. So, yeah, if you see the L, it means Laughlin. It's just coincidental that East Liverpool has an L in it. Excuse me. So those are your shapes. Genesee, Niagara, we'll go backwards. Hudson, the Angelus, King Charles, Seneca, Colonial, American Beauty, and Golden Gate. Now, if we want to talk about rarity, I think it's safe to say that King Charles is going to be the most difficult to find. It is for me. Seneca would be a close second, as would Golden Gate. Niagara is rather difficult to find simply because it had a short run. Now, if you wanted to collect Angelus or Hudson, go for it. I mean, that they made so much of that. It's very easy to find these pieces. And we were talking about a minute ago how Niagara and Genesee don't look like their fancy embossed shapes. Why are they included? You know, it has to do with the markings, but it also has to do with the treatments, because anything on Niagara automatically appeared on Genesee because they were so similar. But Niagara borrows a lot of shapes from Hudson, so as well as the Angelus. So these four actually work together to form somewhat of a subset within this group of fancy embossed shapes. So that's it for now. Next time we'll look at the pre-read shapes. There's only 4 of those, so that'll be a pretty short video. So that's going to be it for today.